Little boy sold flowers in the rain to save mom's life. A boy selling flowers in the rain catches the heart of a lonely doctor. The rain fell in steady sheets over the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the kind of small town where time seemed to slow on purpose. Puddles reflected the glow of dim street lamps, and the scent of wet earth hung in the air. Dr. Ethan Carter sat in his car, hands resting on the steering wheel as his windshield wipers swished back and forth. He was on call at the hospital tonight, though for once, no emergencies had come in. The silence felt heavier than the storm. At 37, Ethan had a career most would envy. He was Willow Creek Hospital's top cardiothoracic surgeon, known for his precision and calm under pressure. But accolades couldn't warm the empty house he returned to every night. Since losing his wife in a car accident 5 years ago, Ethan had withdrawn from the world. His colleagues admired his dedication, but no one dared to call him happy. As the traffic light ahead blinked red, Ethan exhaled, his breath fogging the glass. That was when he saw him, a small figure darting between the raindrops, clutching a tattered basket of flowers. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old. His raincoat was too big, slipping off one shoulder, and his shoes were soaked through. But his face, pale and freckled, was set with determination. The boy approached car after car, holding out a fistful of daisies. Most drivers waved him away or ignored him entirely. Then, he stopped beside Ethan's car. Small knuckles tapped gently against the window. Ethan hesitated before lowering the glass a few inches. "Hi, sir," the boy said, his voice thin but steady against the drumming rain. "Would you like to buy some flowers? Just $3 for a bunch. I'm helping my mom." Ethan's brows drew together. "You're out here in this weather?" The boy nodded, droplets sliding down his cheeks. "I need to sell at least 10 today. My mom's medicine is expensive." For a moment, Ethan said nothing. He studied the child, the worn gloves, the too short scarf, the way his small hands trembled but refused to let go of the daisies. "What's your name?" Ethan asked softly. "Jamie," the boy replied. "Jamie Brooks." "Where's your mom now, Jamie?" "At home. She gets tired a lot, so I told her I'd help." Jamie lifted the basket higher, a hopeful smile tugging at his lips. "Please, sir, just one bunch. They're still fresh." Ethan reached for his wallet and pulled out a crisp 20. He extended it toward the boy. Jamie's eyes widened. "No, sir. It's only 3. I can't take that much." "Consider it for all the flowers," Ethan said gently. But Jamie shook his head. "I only sell what people want, not for pity." Ethan's chest tightened. Slowly, he pulled out a $5 bill and handed it over. "Okay then, 1 bunch." Jamie grinned, his small face lighting up despite the rain. "Thank you." He carefully selected the nicest daisies and passed them through the gap in the window. Before Ethan could say another word, Jamie reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He held it up, the ink running from the rain. "It's my wish list," Jamie said. "I ask God every night to make my mom better." Ethan took the paper carefully. The words, written in uneven child's handwriting, read, "Please help my mom's heart. She's all I have." The light turned green, and a car behind Ethan honked impatiently. Jamie stepped back onto the sidewalk and waved. "Thank you, sir. You're really kind." Then, before disappearing into the rain, he added softly, "Mom says angels walk among us sometimes. Maybe you're one." As Ethan drove off, the boy's words echoed in his mind. Angels walk among us. For the first time in years, something stirred in the walls of Ethan's guarded heart. A question he hadn't dared to ask since the day he lost his wife whispered through the quiet, "What if I could still make a difference?" A chance encounter that unravels old wounds. The rain had eased by the time Dr. Ethan Carter parked outside Willow Creek Hospital, but inside his chest, the storm still raged. Jamie's small voice, the crumpled wish list, and those fragile daisies on the passenger seat, they refused to leave his mind. He tried to shake it off, convincing himself it wasn't his business. Yet, as he walked the quiet hallways of the hospital, a nagging pull deep in his gut told him otherwise. That night, Ethan stayed later than usual. Paperwork piled on his desk, but he couldn't focus. Instead, he found himself staring at the raindrops sliding down his office window. The reflection staring back wasn't the brilliant surgeon his colleagues admired, it was a man haunted by memories. 5 years ago, he'd stood helpless in this very hospital as machines flatlined and his wife slipped away. He had spent every day since drowning in work, building walls no one could breach. Until tonight. Until a boy with rain-soaked shoes and eyes full of quiet courage cracked something open. "Dr. Carter?" Ethan turned to see the hospital's head nurse, Maggie, standing at the door. "You're still here," she said gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," he murmured. Then, after a pause, he added, "Maggie, do you know a woman named Elena Brooks?" Maggie frowned, thinking. "Brooks? Yes. She's come here a few times. Heart condition. Lives on Maple Street, just past the old bakery." "Do you know how serious it is?" Maggie's expression softened. "Serious enough. She's on a transplant list, but it's long. And her son," Maggie's voice faltered, "he's a sweet boy. Brings her here when he can't afford a cab. He's too young to carry so much." Ethan's throat tightened. "And no family to help?" "None that I've heard of. Why do you ask?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "Just curiosity." But it wasn't just curiosity, and he knew it. The next evening, unable to stop himself, Ethan drove to Maple Street. The houses here were old but clean, their porches sagging under years of weather. He spotted Jamie right away. The boy was crouched on the sidewalk, carefully taping petals back onto a daisy. Ethan parked and stepped out, pulling his coat tight against the chill. Jamie looked up, startled. "You're the doctor from yesterday," Ethan nodded. "And you're the boy who sold me flowers." Jamie smiled shyly. "Want more daisies? They're $2 today." "Maybe later," Ethan said softly. "I was hoping to meet your mom. Is she home?" Jamie's smile faltered. "She's resting. She gets tired a lot. But I can ask her." Before Ethan could reply, the door creaked open. A slender woman with pale skin and golden brown hair stepped onto the porch. She leaned heavily on the railing, her breathing labored. "Jamie?" she called gently. "Who's that?" "Just a nice man who bought flowers," Jamie said. Her eyes found Ethan's, and for a moment, the world seemed to still. There was something in her gaze, a mixture of weariness and quiet strength, that rooted him to the spot. "Good evening, ma'am," Ethan said, stepping closer. "I'm Dr. Carter. I work at Willow Creek Hospital. I wanted to check in. Jamie told me about your condition." Elena's expression softened, though a hint of caution lingered. "You didn't have to come all this way." "Maybe not," Ethan admitted, "but I wanted to." Elena nodded slowly, then gestured toward the porch. "Would you like to come in? It's warmer inside." As Ethan followed her into the small, tidy house, he didn't know that this simple visit would change all three of their lives forever. The truth about the mother's illness. The scent of chamomile tea lingered in the small kitchen, mingling with the faint aroma of old wood and rain-soaked curtains. Dr. Ethan Carter sat stiffly at the worn oak table, hands folded, as Elena Brooks poured 2 cups. Her movements were careful, deliberate, each gesture betraying the fragility of a body trying to keep pace with a determined soul. "You didn't have to come," Elena said softly, sliding a steaming cup toward him. "Doctors don't usually make house calls anymore." Ethan offered a faint smile. "Maybe I'm old-fashioned." She settled into the chair across from him, tucking loose strands of hair behind her ear. Her face was pale, framed by the dim light overhead, but there was a quiet dignity about her. "Jamie tells me you've been helping your mother," Ethan began gently. Elena's eyes softened as she glanced toward the living room, where Jamie lay curled up on a threadbare couch, clutching a tattered, stuffed bear. His eyelids fluttered, already succumbing to sleep. "He's a good boy," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Too good. He shouldn't have to worry about things like this." "Your heart," Ethan said cautiously. "You're on the transplant list." She nodded, a faint shadow crossing her face. "Stage 4 cardiomyopathy. My heart's tired, as my doctor puts it. I've been waiting for months. But with my blood type, the odds aren't great. Ethan's chest tightened. He had seen this story too many times. Patients who waited and waited until there was nothing left to wait for. Have they talked to you about other options? He asked. Elena shook her head. I've heard them all. But even if a miracle donor showed up tomorrow, how would I afford it? I don't have insurance. The bills are already drowning us. Miracles aren't always out of reach, Ethan said softly, surprising himself. Elena studied him for a moment, her green eyes unreadable. You don't even know me, Dr. Carter. Why would you care? He hesitated, searching for the right words. Maybe because someone cared for me once when they didn't have to, and I never got the chance to return it. Elena looked down at her trembling hands. You sound like Jamie. He believes angels are real. Maybe he's right. The room fell quiet except for the soft tick of the wall clock. Outside, the rain began again, tapping against the window like gentle fingers. Why did you really come here? Elena asked finally. Ethan met her gaze. Because I think I can help. The next morning, Ethan sat alone in his office at Willow Creek Hospital, staring at his computer screen. He had quietly requested access to Elena Brooks' file. It confirmed what he already feared. Her time was running out. He scrolled to the transplant registry and stared at the waiting list. Dozens of names. Dozens of lives hanging in the balance. Without thinking, he clicked to open his own medical file. His blood type, O negative, universal donor. His pulse quickened. It was a long shot, but what if? Dr. Carter? Maggie poked her head in. You're doing surgery in 10 minutes. Ethan minimized the screen. Thank you, I'll be there. As Maggie left, Ethan leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. If I'm a match, he thought, I could save her, but if she knew who I really am, would she even accept? Or would she see it as charity? The memory of Jamie's small hand tapping his car window flashed through his mind. Please help my mom's heart. She's all I have. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he thought he'd lost forever, a spark of purpose. The doctor's dilemma, risking it all to save them. Ethan Carter's hands trembled slightly as he signed the lab request form. It was an unusual request for a doctor to test himself as a potential organ donor, but he had insisted on anonymity. No one at the hospital questioned him. He was, after all, Willow Creek's most respected surgeon. When the phlebotomist drew his blood, she didn't ask questions either. She assumed it was for a routine physical. Only Ethan knew the truth. He needed to find out if he was a match for Elena Brooks before it was too late. As the needle pricked his skin, memories surged. His wife on a hospital bed years ago, the machine's flatlining, and the feeling of absolute helplessness crushing him. He had vowed never again to let himself care this deeply. But now, a little boy and his frail mother were dismantling every wall he'd built. 2 days later, the results arrived in his private inbox. Perfect match. The words seemed to burn through his screen. The odds had been slim, but here it was, clear and undeniable. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand down his face. This should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like stepping to the edge of a cliff. Donating a kidney was no small decision. He knew the risks better than anyone. Possible complications, weeks of recovery. And then there was the question he couldn't silence. What if she refuses because it's me? If Elena knew he was her donor, her pride might keep her from accepting. Or worse, she might see his actions as pity, instead of the deep, inexplicable connection he felt. That evening, Ethan drove to Maple Street again. The house was quiet, lights dimmed except for the soft glow in the kitchen. Through the window, he saw Elena hunched over a piece of fabric, sewing by hand. She paused often, clutching her chest as if even breathing was an effort. Jamie sat at the table beside her, coloring on a scrap of paper. He held up his drawing proudly, a stick-figure family holding hands under a bright sun. One of the figures was tall, with messy hair and a small smile. "Who's this?" Elena asked, pointing to the tall man. Jamie grinned. "That's Dr. Carter. He's nice. He's gonna help you." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He approached the hospital's transplant coordinator. "I have a patient, Elena Brooks. She needs a kidney." The coordinator nodded solemnly. "We know. She's on the list, but her condition is worsening." "I want to donate," Ethan said. The coordinator blinked. "You're saying?" "I'm a match, but I want this to stay confidential. She can never know it's me." "That's highly irregular, doctor," the coordinator replied cautiously. "Ethics committees." "Do whatever you have to," Ethan said firmly. "Just make it happen." That night, Ethan sat in his living room, staring at the untouched dinner on his plate. "What am I doing?" he thought. "This isn't professional. This isn't safe. Maneuver." But when he closed his eyes, he saw Jamie's hopeful smile and Elena's trembling hands. "Maneuver. This isn't about me," he whispered aloud. "This is about giving them a chance." As the transplant date approached, Ethan made one final visit to the Brooks home. Elena was weaker now, her voice barely above a whisper. But she still tried to greet him with a smile. "You've been too kind, Dr. Carter," she murmured. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. Elena studied him for a long moment. "Jamie says you're an angel." Ethan forced a smile, though his chest ached. "I'm no angel, Elena. Just someone who doesn't want to lose another person he cares about. If only she knew how much." "How are you feeling about the story so far? I'd really love to know what you think. Did it touch your heart or maybe remind you of something from your own life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're at it, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? I'd love to see how far this story travels. An act of sacrifice and a hidden identity. The morning of the transplant dawned gray and cold, the winter sun struggling to pierce through heavy clouds. Ethan Carter sat in the pre-op room, dressed in a sterile gown, his heart thudding beneath the thin fabric. The hospital staff bustled around him, oblivious to the storm raging in his chest. He had performed hundreds of surgeries in his career, but this time, he wasn't the surgeon. He was the patient. A nurse entered, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Carter, are you sure about this? You still have the right to back out." Ethan looked up, his eyes steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "I'm sure." The nurse nodded, though her eyes betrayed curiosity. "You've listed yourself as an anonymous donor. She'll never know?" "She can't," Ethan said firmly. "If she finds out, she might refuse. And she doesn't have time for pride." The nurse hesitated. "You care for her, don't you?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Earlier that morning, Ethan had left a small envelope on Elena Brooks' bedside table. Inside was a handwritten letter, folded carefully between the pages of Jamie's drawing, the one of a tall man holding hands with the boy and his mother. "Elena, by the time you read this, the surgery will be done. My name isn't just Ethan Carter, your neighborly doctor. It's also the name on the donor form. I am the one giving you my kidney. I didn't come into your life as a surgeon or a savior. I came because I saw something in you and Jamie that I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. I know you may feel angry when you learn the truth. I know you may say I've crossed a line. But please believe this. I didn't do this out of pity. I did it because you and Jamie reminded me that even after great loss, a heart can learn to love again. If after this you never wish to see me again, I'll understand. But let this be Jamie's miracle. Let it be yours too. Ethan." Hours later, as the surgical team worked in silence, Elena's transplant began. Ethan lay unconscious in the adjoining operating room. His pulse was steady, but weak from anesthesia. The lead surgeon glanced at him briefly. "Strange man," the surgeon murmured. "He saves lives every day, yet he risks his own for a woman he barely knows." The nurse smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why he's doing it, because he knows what it means to lose someone too soon." When Elena woke, the world felt different. Light seemed brighter, air thicker, her body heavier yet somehow more alive. She blinked against the hospital lights, her vision swimming. "Mom?" Jamie's small voice tugged her back to reality. Her son was perched on the edge of her bed, clutching her hand with tear-streaked cheeks. "Jamie," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're okay now," Jamie said softly. "The doctor said it worked." Elena's eyes filled with tears. How is that possible? Before Jamie could answer, a nurse entered, carrying a folder. Mrs. Brooks, we had to file paperwork with the registry. Your donor requested to remain anonymous, but legally, you're entitled to know his name. Elena's heart thudded in her chest as the nurse handed her the folder. 2 words stared back at her. Ethan Carter. Her breath caught. She turned to the nightstand and saw the envelope tucked under Jamie's drawing. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the letter and read every word. By the end, her tears had blurred the ink. "Mom?" Jamie asked nervously. Elena pulled him close, pressing her lips to his forehead. "He gave me more than a kidney, Jamie. He gave us a second chance." In the recovery room next door, Ethan stirred. He felt groggy, his body aching, but when his eyes fluttered open, he saw a small figure sitting beside him. "Jamie." The boy grinned, holding up a crumpled $5 bill. "This is for you," Jamie said, "because you're my miracle." Ethan managed a weak smile. "You're supposed to save that for flowers." "I already got the best flower," Jamie whispered. "My mom." Ethan's throat tightened. Before he could respond, Elena appeared in the doorway. She looked pale but radiant, her green eyes glistening with tears. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then Elena stepped forward and took his hand gently. "You didn't have to be a hero, Ethan," she said softly. "You just had to be you." Ethan closed his eyes as a wave of peace washed over him. The reunion that changed 2 lives forever. The winter sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, sending pale light across Willow Creek Hospital's courtyard. Inside room 207, Elena Brooks sat propped up in bed, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. Her skin no longer had the sickly pallor it once did. Color had begun to return to her cheeks, and though her body still ached, her heart beat stronger with every passing hour. Across the hall, Ethan Carter stirred awake. The steady beep of the heart monitor was strangely comforting, a rhythm he had heard countless times in others, but never attached to his own chest before. "Good morning, Dr. Carter," a nurse whispered as she checked his IV. Ethan tried to smile, but winced instead. "Morning," he croaked. His body felt heavy, drained, but alive. "There's someone here to see you," the nurse said softly. Before Ethan could respond, the door creaked open. Jamie tiptoed in, carrying a small bouquet of daisies clumsily tied together with string. "Hi," Jamie said shyly. "I brought these for you." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Daisies. My favorite." Jamie climbed onto the chair beside him, swinging his legs. "Mom says you gave her the greatest gift anyone could, but I think you gave it to both of us." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "Your mom's strong, Jamie. She's the one who fought for you all this time." Jamie shook his head. "She says she wouldn't have made it without you." A few hours later, Lena appeared in the doorway. She looked fragile yet radiant, wrapped in a hospital robe, her hair falling softly around her face. For a long moment, she simply stood there, clutching the doorframe for support, her green eyes locked on Ethan. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. "But you did." Ethan tried to sit up straighter. "I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Elena crossed the room slowly, her steps careful but steady. She sank into the chair beside him and took his hand in hers. "You gave me back my life," she whispered. "How do I even begin to thank you?" "You don't," Ethan replied, his voice breaking. "Just live. That's enough." Elena's fingers tightened around his. "You didn't just save my life, Ethan. You became part of it." In the days that followed, the 2 patients often found themselves sitting together in the hospital's sunroom. Ethan, still recovering from the donation surgery, found a strange comfort in Elena's presence. She would sketch quietly in her notebook while Jamie played nearby, his laughter filling the sterile space with warmth. One afternoon, Elena handed Ethan a drawing. It showed 3 figures standing hand in hand under a tree in bloom. A tall man, a slender woman, and a boy with a wide smile. "This is us?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet. Elena nodded. "Jamie says families don't have to match to belong. Maybe he's right." Ethan stared at the drawing for a long time, something deep within him shifting. For years he had filled the void in his life with work, awards, and isolation. But sitting here with Elena and Jamie, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever, a sense of home. The day before their discharge, Elena found Ethan alone by the window, staring at the snow falling gently over the hospital gardens. "I heard you've decided to take time off from the hospital," she said softly. Ethan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I've been chasing the wrong things for too long." "And what are you chasing now?" He took a deep breath. "Something real, something worth staying for." Elena smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Maybe you've already found it." Ethan reached for her hand and held it gently. "Maybe I have. The bloom of a new family in a quiet town." Spring arrived in Willow Creek, with the scent of blooming lilacs and the soft hum of bees dancing over wildflowers. The little town, once cloaked in winter's gray, now burst with life. In a modest white house at the edge of town, laughter drifted through open windows like sunlight spilling across the floor. Ethan Carter stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, as he flipped pancakes on the stove. The smell of butter and syrup filled the air. "2 pancakes for the artist, and 3 for the little troublemaker," he said, setting plates on the table. Jamie grinned from ear to ear. "I'm not a troublemaker. I'm the official taste tester." Elena chuckled as she settled into her chair, her hand brushing back her now glossy hair. Her cheeks were pink with health, her eyes brighter than he'd ever seen them. "You're the reason we run out of syrup so fast," she teased. "Not true!" Jamie protested, though his mouth was already full. Ethan watched them with quiet reverence. He had once believed that life after loss was only an empty road. But now, in this sunlit kitchen, he saw a different truth. Love wasn't something you find once. It was something you could choose again. That afternoon, they strolled together through the park. Jamie darted ahead, chasing a kite, while Ethan and Elena walked side by side. "Are you sure about leaving the hospital for good?" Elena asked softly. Ethan nodded. "I thought saving lives meant working endless hours in an operating room, but now I see saving a life can mean staying for the ones who need you most." Elena's hand brushed his. "Jamie keeps asking if you'll stay forever." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I'd like to." Elena blinked, surprised. Reaching into his coat pocket, Ethan pulled out a small velvet box. "Elena Brooks," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I don't know if I deserve this second chance, but I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I do. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Elena's eyes as her hand flew to her mouth. Jamie, hearing her gasp, came running back, stopping abruptly when he saw the ring box. "Say yes, Mom," Jamie cried, bouncing on his toes. "Say yes!" Elena laughed through her tears, nodding as she cupped Ethan's face in her hands. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Months later, on a golden summer evening, their wedding took place in the same park where Ethan had proposed. It was small and simple, just close friends, neighbors, and the hum of cicadas in the background. As Elena walked down the aisle in a flowing white dress, Jamie proudly held her hand. At the altar, Ethan waited, his eyes never leaving hers. "You saved me, Ethan," Elena whispered as they joined hands. "No," he said softly. "You both saved me first." In time, they became known as the Carters of Willow Creek, a family that grew gardens, hosted pancake breakfasts, and welcomed neighbors like old friends. Ethan co-founded a small foundation in Jamie's name, Jamie's Heart, to support families awaiting transplants. Elena returned to illustrating children's books, her first title dedicated to the doctor who gave us more than we could ever repay. At night, when the house grew quiet and the stars spilled across the sky, Ethan would hold Elena close and watch Jamie sleeping peacefully in his room. He no longer needed the penthouse, the accolades, or the boardroom. Home was here, in laughter, in love, in second chances. And in that quiet, under the bloom of spring and the hum of life, they found forever. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.